Hey everyone, I'm here on South Reynolds Avenue in Gettysburg, um, right in the middle of Reynolds Woods. Um, this quiet spot was once a part of John Harp's farm, and it became the scene of some of the fiercest and most important fighting on July 1st, 1863, the first day of the battle. Um, but the story here starts long before the Civil War. Millions of years ago, the geology of this region shaped long, parallel ridges um, out of limestone, shale, and sandstone. Those ridges, like McPherson's Ridge and Seminary Ridge, would later make perfect defensive lines for soldiers. For centuries, native peoples lived in this area, hunting, farming, and trading. In the 1700s, Scots, Irish, and German settlers moved in, clearing land and building farms. By the mid 1800s, this land west of Gettysburg was a patchwork of well-established farms. McPherson's, which belonged to Edward McPherson. Um, a politician in Washington who rented it to a tenant farmer, John Slants, the Herbst farm, where we are now, was owner, operated. A little further west was Emmanuel Harmon's farm, also owned by a wealthy absentee landlord and worked by hired hands. In June of 1863, these were working farms with ripening wheat in the fields, livestock in the pastures, and families going about their lives, not battlefields. And we passed it, but on June 30th, Union Cavalry under Brigadier General John Buford entered Gettysburg. Buford took one look at the ridges west of town and decided they were perfect for a delaying action. His mission was to hold the high ground until the Union infantry could arrive and take the true prize, the high ground of Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge, just south of town. At dawn on June 1st, Beaver's 3,000 dismounted cavalrymen fought here against Henry Heath's advancing Confederates. Outnumbered more than 2-1, they fought for over 2 hours, slowing the Confederate advance. And behind us, the avenue through these woods. Around mid-morning, Major General Buford, General John Reynolds, arrived with elements of the Union First Corps. He immediately committed to the fight here, overriding orders to fall back toward Maryland. As he led the Iron Brigade into this woodlet that we are in now, to hit Confederate General James Archer's brigade, Reynolds was struck by a bullet and killed instantly. One of the most respected Union commanders, gone in minutes. The Iron Brigade, made up of regiments from Wisconsin, Indiana, and Michigan, smashed into the Archer's men right here. This wasn't long distance fighting, it was close, brutal, and chaotic. Under these big oaks, Archer's line broke and Archer himself was captured, the first Confederate general taken in the war. But the Union paid dearly. Some Iron Brigade regiments lost more than 70% of their men before noon. Peaceful, isn't it? It's amazing to think that this woodlet was once the site of brutal combat, bloody combat. It's unimaginable to think about this woodlet right here being the site of that. This tree right here must have just came down recently. You can see that it, wow. It must have came down somewhere down there and then probably hit this tree, shattering it, and the rest fell down there. Damn. I wonder what's happened. I mean, couldn't have been recent, because I don't think we got any bad storms, but in the last couple of weeks. But something must have happened. Because a tree just doesn't shatter like this. And it wasn't cut down, because it's not a smooth cut. So, something to look into, I guess. If we head down here, you'll see Willoughby 1. In 1863, it was lined with brush, making it tough. Let me get past this point right here. Making it tough to cross under fire. After being driven back across it, Confederate forces regrouped on the far side and came back in force later that day. By afternoon, more Confederate divisions under Robert Rhodes and Dorsey Pender hit the Union line from multiple directions. The McPherson farm just beyond the ridge became both a defensive strongpoint and a field hospital. The unfinished railroad cut nearby was a trap in the morning and an obstacle in the afternoon. Eventually, the Union position here collapsed. The survivors fell back through town to Cemetery Hill. The high ground Buford had wanted to protect from the start. When the battle ended on July 3rd, this area was wrecked. Confederate troops had burned the Harmon mansion and barn. Crops were trampled, fences torn down, and the McPherson's barn's floors were soaked in the blood from days of surgery. Thousands of soldiers were buried in shallow graves right here in these fields. And this is Willoughby 1. crossed the bank there, or where the Confederates came from, where they crossed through and went through these woods to confront the Union defensive lines on McPherson Ridge. It's quiet here. All you hear is the bugs. Calls of the bugs, the birds. The blow of the breeze in the trees. It's so peaceful and nice around here. Perfect spot to just relax and enjoy and give a few moments of silence for the men and the secretive women who also fought in this battle, disguised as men. But this is where it all began. So let's stay here a minute. In the months after the battle, David Wills began creating the Soldiers' National Cemetery to give Union dead a proper burial. Basil Biggs, free of African-American farmer and veterinarian from Gettysburg, led a crew that reinterred thousands of Union soldiers. Confederate dead were left here for nearly a decade before Southern Memorial Associations finally moved them to cemeteries in the South. When the veterans returned, they marked this place with monuments to Reynolds, to the Iron Brigade, and to their individual regiments. They wanted, They wanted future generations to see this as defeat, but as a heroic stand that bought the time needed to hold the high ground and win the battle. But for decades, much of this land stayed in private hands. There were hotels and a trolley line, even a country club built on First Day's ground. Preservation didn't really take hold until 1895, when the federal government took over after a Supreme Court ruling. I am so glad to see all this greenery. I mean, yeah, things have been dry recently, but overall, this whole summer, whole year, we've got, all this spring and summer, we've gotten a lot of rain, and this is what we get from it, and I'm glad we got it. Guess they finally cut up some of the fallen trees to make an easier path. I mean, right here was completely blocked by a big ass tree. Well, way here at least. So that pathway there was a walk around to avoid this tree. But I finally cut it so now we can just come straight through. That's always an option. Where are you? Damn it. Not the bird, but it flew away. Today, the National Park Service manages this land and even leases some of it to farmers, keeping its 19th century agricultural look. When you walk here, you're surrounded by layers of history, geology, millions of years old, farmland that fed families, ground where Buford's, Gamble, and Reynolds sacrifice shaped the battle. And a century and a half of efforts to preserve it. This was no warm-up act. The first day at Gettysburg was a crucible that decided the shape of the next 2 days, in many ways, the fate of the nation. Most people cross this bridge without realizing they're walking over one of the Civil War's first crucibles. Down there, where the rails run, is a railroad cut. It wasn't built for war. In the 1830s, it was supposed to carry iron and goods out of Gettysburg. Politics and money killed that dream. The work stopped, and this empty scar was waited. On the morning of July 1st, 1863, Joseph Davis's Confederate brigade slid into this cut. From their point of view, it was perfect. Deep sides, solid cover, and a way to pour fire into the Union right flank without taking much themselves. Good decision. Good strategy, don't you think? But here's the thing about perfect positions. They can trap you. And that's exactly what happened. Just beyond those trees on the ridge, I think that ridge is what. So, just beyond those trees on the ridge, the 147th New York was fighting for its life. They'd been ordered to retreat, but their colonel went down before the message reached everyone. They held their ground until they were nearly wiped out. 3/4, 75% of the regiment gone. Then came the Iron Brigade. The 6th Wisconsin charged right toward this cut. Rufus Dawes led them, 170 yards in the open. He said the men were falling like one for every yard gained, and still they pressed on, crowding around the collars, faces set, bodies hitting the dirt, and never breaking stride. They hit the lip of the cut and poured fire down into the Confederates below. For Davis's men, it was too late. The walls that had seemed like protection had become prison walls. Over 200 surrendered right down there. That was one moment in a day of shifting momentum. Union troops that here won this small fight, this skirmish. Union troops here but by evening they'd been driven back through the town to the hills beyond. From here, you can almost hear it, the muskets cracking, the shouts, the sudden silence when the firing stopped, and you realize this wasn't just strategy, it was human beings, some barely older than kids, making a choice to stand, to charge, to surrender, all in a span of minutes. This bridge connects more than two sides of a railroad. It connects us to a morning when bravery, loss, and chance all met in this one scar in the earth. History isn't just something you read in a book. It's layered under our feet. And here at Oak Hill in Gettysburg, you can feel every one of those layers. Today I'm standing on ground that's been a farm, a battlefield, a national shrine. This hill has seen peaceful harvests, catastrophic bloodshed, and moments of reconciliation, and its story is still being argued over today. This was all farmland in the 1700s. Adams County settled under the Penn family. In the 1730s, became one of Pennsylvania's agricultural powerhouses. By the mid 1800s, it was famous for its apples and peaches, with fields of wheat, corn, oats, hay stretching in every direction. The very spot where we're standing on was the Forney farm, owned by John Forney. His orchards were thick with fruit trees, his crops healthy and diverse. We know exactly how prosperous it was because after the battle, Forney filed a damage claim listing massive agricultural losses. That's how productive this farm had been until war tore it apart. Just to the south was Elias Shade's brick home, which doubled as Oak Ridge Seminary, a girls' school run by his daughter. Think about that. Education and domestic life unfolding right here before this landscape became a war zone. And Oak Hill itself, it's the third highest point on the Gettysburg battlefield. That means views in almost every direction. In 1863, it was a patchwork of fields, orchards, stone walls, and woodlets, perfect for cover, firing lanes, and defensive positions. Both armies understood its value immediately. Around noon on the first day of the battle, Confederate Major General Robert E. Rhodes marched 8,000 of his division right up here onto Oak Hill. From this height, his artillery could pour down into the flank of the Union First Corps. But what happened next was a textbook study in command failure and adaptation. O'Neill's brigade attacked too early, without its full force, and was thrown back by Union troops behind a stone wall. Iverson's brigade advanced without skirmishers, straight into the point blank volleys from Baxter's brigade. Over 900 of their 1,400 men fell in minutes. Survivors called it Iverson's Pits, because so many bodies lay in shallow depressions here. Then came the turnaround. Daniel's brigade fought fiercely, pinning Union forces in place, and Ramazur's brigade swung in on the flank, breaking the Union line and sending them into a chaotic retreat through the streets of Gettysburg. This ground shows us both sides of the battlefield leadership, how poor communication and no reconnaissance can lead to disaster, and how decisive adaptation can win the day. Fast forward to fast forward Fast forward 50 years to the 1913 reunion of Union and Confederate veterans. Right here, Union veteran Andrew Carlin proposed something bold, a great peace memorial. Funded by both North and South, it took 25 years, but in 1938, it finally became a reality. Architect Paul Philip Craig designed it with symbolism in every stone: Maine granite from the north, Alabama limestone from the south, a 47.5-foot shaft crowned with a bronze urn holding an eternal flame, bas reliefs showing peace and goodwill, and an eagle for national unity. It was built deliberately on ground where some of the battle's worst slaughter happened, transforming the site's meaning from division to unity. An enduring light to guide us in the unity and fellowship. With farmers in the light as God gives us to see the right, Lincoln. And here's another view of the battlefield, Oak Ridge. Again, this is where right here is where General Rhodes held the position. And as you can easily see with this view, you have a large overview of Oak Ridge and even towards Ronald's Woods and McPherson Ridge and into the town. So Rhodes held a huge advantage, and even though two of his attacks failed because of miscommunications and all that, still held a huge advantage. And he finally took Oak Ridge and pushed line. So the Union line was pushed from McPherson Ridge and Oak Ridge through the town to the high ground there. So you can truly appreciate how strategic and valuable this ground was. And before we go, um, let's read this plaque real quick, which describes Wool's attacks. So, Confederate on July 1st, 2 p.m., Confederate General Robert Rhodes arrived here around noon with 8,000 men. Seeing the Union First Corps positions to his immediate front, which would be this area, he attacked. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Carter's artillery here in Oaks Ridge, with positions like this right here, thundered into action, hitting Union troops on Oak Ridge about 1/3 mile in front of you. 1/3 mile, so in that direction. Colonel Edward O'Neill and General Alfred Iverson's Confederate brigades uncoordinated advance resulted in a bloodbath. About 4 p.m., 2 hours after the attacks began, Rhodes reorganized, launching subsequent assaults. Despite heavy losses, the Confederates took the field, pushing the Union soldiers back through the streets of Gettysburg. After wheeling into position, cannoneers unlimbered and sighted their guns, preparing to bombard the Union line. And this is a map of the Confederate and Union troop lines. Rhodes ordered the brigades of O'Neill, Iverson, and Daniel to advance. Poorly timed and led, disaster ensued. Rhodes later pressed his attack with Daniel and Ramseur. So, O'Neill and Iverson, though their attacks were uncoordinated and failed. But later, Daniel and Ramseur pushed forward and finally pushed all the Union lines. Wheeler, Delgar, Sismosvig, Paul, Baxter, and Cutler back through the town, past Pennsylvania College, and through the town of Gettysburg, which is out towards that way. So, that's Oak Ridge. That is actually where the Union lines were. And all on this area was where the Confederate lines were, from down to the railway cut, to the railway cut, up here to the hill, and to down towards Carlisle Road in that direction. Peace eternal in a nation united, and that's what we are today. United. But with how polarized politics and all that is today, how long will that last? Who knows? Only the time can tell, and our choices can also influence that. Remember that. The dedication was a national spectacle. 250,000 people came, 1,800 veterans, most in their 90s, attended. President Franklin D. Roosevelt gave a speech linking Civil War unity to his New Deal vision for economic justice. The emotional peak: 2 elderly veterans, 1 Union, 1 Confederate, pulled a massive flag aside to reveal the memorial, and the eternal flame was lit. dimmed or extremely extinguished during World War II and the 1970s energy crisis, restored in 1988 and repaired again in 2014. Here's the thing, the Porney farmhouse still stood after the battle, but it was torn down in 1937. Why? To open the view. Back then, the Park Service valued an idealized memorial landscape, more than preserving actual wartime structures. And the threats didn't stop. Over the decades, people have tried to build an airport, inns, and even a casino nearby. Each time, public outrage stopped it. The fight over what's hallowed ground still isn't over. The Park Service now faces a tricky balance, telling the grim, bloody truth of July 1st, while also honoring the uplifting story of the Peace Memorial. Those aren't the same emotional tone, but both are part of Oak Hill's reality. Oak Hill is all of America in one place. It's a site of conflict, where mismanaged attacks cost hundreds of lives in minutes. It's a site of reconciliation, rebranded as a shrine to unity, even at the cost of erasing physical battlefield remains. And it's a site of contestation, where each generation has to defend the meaning of hallowed ground against commercial pressures. It's a palimpsest, layers of history written, erased, and rewritten, and it reminds us that how we choose to remember is just as important as what happened. Standing here, you can imagine the orchard rows, hear the crack of rifle fire, feel the tension of political speeches, and see the eternal flame flickering in the wind. This hill isn't just about 1863, it's about who we were, who we are, and who we still want to be. And before we go, a dedication on July 3rd, 1938, during the 75th battle anniversary, over 1,800 Civil War veterans and 250,000 others gathered to see President Franklin D. Roosevelt dedicate this memorial. 2 veterans, one from each army, lowered a 50-foot flag, revealing the northern granite and southern limestone memorial, honoring those who fought in the war and pledging peace in a now reunited country. It was the last reunion of surviving Civil War veterans to take place at Gettysburg. The 75th anniversary celebrated the ability of former enemies to return to the battlefield as friends and countrymen, while the bravery and sacrifice of both Union and Confederate soldiers was honored. The issues at the heart of the war, race, equality, and the meaning of freedom, went largely unacknowledged. And this was the dedication ceremony. And President Franklin D. Roosevelt dedicated this monument, saying all of them we honor, not asking under which flag they fought. Then, thankful that they stand together under one flag now. Thanks for walking this ground with me today. If you believe places like this should be preserved and remembered, share this video and make sure you talk to everyone and preach that this ground, every moment, every choice matters and needs to be remembered. and let's keep this conversation going.